Waiting for it to tell me that we are live, my friends. Thank you for being here. Almost there. We're live. Okay, so in today's show, what we're going to do is talk about some new encouraging data from scientists in Hong Kong finding that the Omicron variant actually preferentially infects the bronchial tissue, which is part of the upper airway, about 70 times greater than the Delta variant and also the OG variant, which is all good news. And it has a 10 times less affinity to bind in the lower lungs. Now, we put out a video about a week ago that talked about this. There was a lot of naysayers in the comments saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. You're an idiot, Mike. Let the experts figure this out. And so this is one of the first mechanistic studies to validate what a lot of research up to now has hinted at, but yet I put it out there and I was willing to be wrong. And it turns out that the science is validating just that. Then we're going to get into excess deaths here in the US and compare different states and compare the top causes and the top reasons why people are dying in excessive numbers over the past 2 years. Now, please be kind in the comments here on YouTube especially, but I want to review these numbers because if you listen to the mainstream network television, you hear a lot about these states that are doing terrible things like letting kids go to school without facial coverings. These states are doing terrible things like allowing businesses to allow people to take personal responsibility and choose whether or not they want to wear a mask. But it turns out that if you compare the age-adjusted death rates from COVID-19 and compare that between the state of Florida, which has been wide open since May of 2020, compared to California, which has been essentially on lockdown off and on for the better part of 2 years, the outcomes and age-adjusted deaths from the virus and excessive deaths over the course of the last 20 months, they speak volumes. So I think it's really important because we're hearing so much more about how the government can help you, the individual, protect you, the individual. But we're going to sort of question that assumption by looking at the data and the lack of correlation between government interference and outcomes when it comes to age-adjusted population-based mortality. So let's get into this very first study right here. Okay, this was just published yesterday by scientists in Hong Kong. The title of the paper here is HKUM Med finds that the Omicron SARS-CoV-2 can infect faster and better than Delta in human bronchus, but with less severe infection in the lung. So that's the infographic here. What I would like to do is just share with you what we're talking about. We're talking about the bronchus, which is in the upper airway, and comparing that to the lung. Now, as we talked about on the video about a week ago, and I shared a lot of this over on Instagram, for friends on Instagram, you'll remember those posts, that part of the mutations that are interesting or sort of curious with regards to this new variant of concern, the Omicron variant, is that it has a higher affinity for the ACE2 receptor. Now, we know that the ACE2 receptor is found in grading levels or varying degrees of concentration. It's higher concentrated in the upper portion of the airway, in the bronchus, and the upper part of the lungs in comparison to the lower lung. So now that you have that visual of the anatomy, let's go into what the scientists found. So a study led by researchers from the LKS Facility of Medicine at the University of Hong Kong provides the first information of how the novel variant of concern of SARS-CoV-2, that is the Omicron variant, infects human respiratory tract. They say the researchers found that Omicron SARS-CoV-2 infects and multiplies 70 times faster than Delta variant and the original SARS-CoV-2 variant in the human bronchus. Now, this sounds scary. Oh my gosh, 70 times. Friends, this is actually good. You would much rather have a virus replicate up here than lower in the lungs, because a lower deep lung replicating virus means pneumonia, fibrosis, inflammation, mucus, poor oxygenation, and the whole thing. So that's all good news. Now, the downside, of course, is increased transmissibility. But if there's a trade-off where it's easier to catch, but it's not as severe, that is all good news. So now, again, this story was picked up by Reuters, by CNBC, by Business Wire. I mean, there's a bunch of networks picking this up. Now, this is one of the first mechanistic studies looking at this. Now, as I continue on here, I want to share with you these images, okay? A little bit sciencey, but if you look here, and this is an in vitro study, so this is not like, scientists are infecting humans, but you can see here, Omicron preferentially replicates in the upper bronchus compared to the lower part of the lung, which is all good news. And they go on to say, this may explain why Omicron transmits faster between humans than previous variants. Their study also showed that the Omicron infection in the lung is significantly lower than the SARS-CoV-2, which may be an indicator for lower disease severity. This research is currently under peer review for publication. Okay, so I just share that with you because when I shared this post on Instagram on December 6th, 10 days ago, there was a lot of people that said, I flagged this for misinformation. You don't know what you're talking about. Just shut the F up, Mike. Sit down, stay in your lane, all of this. You can see the comments. You can see the stuff that, and then here, a week later, we have scientists saying the exact same thing. Now, I'm not saying this because I want to be right. I could be wrong. I don't care. But there's a lot of historical evidence that we reviewed in that detailed podcast that I posted a week ago, which is actually right here, and I will link it below. The title here is Study Hints Omicron Mutations Make It More Mild. Again, I got a lot of flack for this. I was actually quite nervous and like a little bit jittery before I posted this because, of the implications of me potentially being wrong and fact checkers and all of that. But now more and more evidence is accumulating sharing that. So that's as far as we're going to talk about that conversation, friends. Let's talk about these numbers. Excess deaths. This is important because you hear in the media, you've heard a lot about this, especially this week. Why? Because over the last 20 months, in the United States alone, there has been over 800,000 combined deaths from COVID-19. Now, what you're not hearing about is deaths from other causes. Believe it or not, people do die from other causes, from heart disease, for example, from hypertension, from obesity, from diabetes, from cancer. People die from other causes besides COVID-19. And there's ample evidence to suggest that our own intervention strategies aimed at sort of protecting people and flattening the curve and all that actually worsened some of people's quality adjusted life years and caused them to unnecessarily die earlier. And we're going to review that data. That data is actually quite compelling. There's pretty interesting data right here looking at the demonstrable increase in various causes of heart disease, from hypertension diseases, cerebrovascular disease, the list goes on, heart failure, Alzheimer's, and all of that. So we're going to look at the data and compare this with different states, because you hear a lot about Florida and how evil, awful Florida and Texas are, and how great California and New York are. But if you look at the excess deaths, they're not too significant in terms of their population and age-adjusted deaths. So that's where we're going, friends. I want to welcome you back to this live session. Thank you for being here on a Thursday night. It's always great to do these live because pretty soon we're going to get to your questions. Now, if you're here with us live and you're enjoying this content, please hit that like button. That goes a long way. If you're watching the replay, you can leave us a comment. If you're here, I see all your comments that are coming up on the feed. We're going to get to a lot of your questions very, very soon. We have to cover some cool stuff first, though. Now, I do want to let you know, if you want an amazing shirt or you want to inspire healthy living conversations, you want to inspire people to make better lifestyle choices, support our sister company, Myoscience. We're coming up with a lot of different interesting t-shirts that can spread health promoting messages, not fear and other fear-based messaging. We're trying to encourage people to take healthy living seriously. So check this shirt out. Eat like your life depends on it. When you buy 2 shirts, you get the third one free. There's a bunch of new shirts coming. I was just working with our designer today. So you can hop on over to myoscience.com. That's MYOXCIENCE.com, myoscience.com. And when you put 3 t-shirts in your shopping cart, you only pay for 2. You can also just use the coupon code podcast if you have other items you want to save, like vitamin D or other things. So anyway, here we go. Let's dive into it. Now, when we hear about Florida, we think, oh, Florida is terrible. Like Ron DeSantis lets people open their businesses. He doesn't have restrictions on how many people can go out to breakfast, right? Like what a jerk. He's killing everyone. Well, if you actually look at the data, okay, so let's look at the data. You need to understand that when you're comparing states, there's a few things that matter in the context of COVID, like how old are the people that live in the state? Because it turns out that one of the major risk factors for severe disease happens to be age. Individuals, if you have a high concentration of individuals over the age of 65 in a particular area or state or city, they're more vulnerable, right? So Florida is one of the most vulnerable states in the union because it has the second highest concentration of people over the age of 65. So when you're comparing Florida to California or Florida to Oregon, you need to consider that. So let's look at age-adjusted deaths, okay, from COVID-19 and compare that to outcomes. So if you look here, Florida ranks number 27. Again, for all of the talk about how terrible Florida is and how great Pennsylvania is, like for example, because all the restrictions in Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey, Florida is number 27, Pennsylvania is number 25. California, for all the hype, Gavin Newsom was just on The View the other day saying that, basically Florida has 53% more COVID-19 deaths. But what he forgot to mention to you is that's not an age-adjusted factor. That's just a population-adjusted factor, which, again, look here, population or age-adjusted factors here, California is at 33. So again, for all of the business closures, for all of the restrictions, for all of the mandates, for all of the unintended harm that is associated with all those things, they're pretty similar. 27 is not too far off from 33. Now, remember that for everyone who loses a job, who's unemployed, who gets fired, right? These things, that has harmed as well. And so there's a paper that we're going to dive into shortly of the indirect effects. This is in the journal PLOS ONE Biology. I actually shared this with you back in September, but here it is again. Impact of COVID-19 on excess mortality, life expectancy, and years lost in life in the United States. And so they talk about how individuals under the age of 45 suffered more from the indirect effects of COVID-19, which is not often mentioned. I don't know why we only focus on deaths from the virus and we seemingly don't care about the unintended harms of our strategies to sort of protect people. Joblessness, homelessness, isolation, inability to exercise because you're unable to go to a gym because of different restrictions. Okay, these things, my friends, damage health, which compromise and take a withdrawal from this bank that we know to be called the Quality Adjusted Life Year Bank. So when you talk to epidemiologists who study these things, they look at population health and public health in the lens of quality adjusted life years, right? Grandma doesn't have that many quality adjusted life years left compared to your 5-year-old, right? So if you're saving grandma at the expense of robbing the 5-year-old of 50 years of quality adjusted life years, hypothetically, that's a bad public policy. What we're trying to do, when we shared a whole video on this, actually November of 2020, about maximizing the quality adjusted life years for the entire population, right? And that's something that we don't hear about. Now, this is important because when you look at the excess death numbers that we're going to talk about, there is a lot of excess deaths from conditions that are largely caused by diet and lifestyle. And I've shared with you this hypothesis before that, our own interventions we're starting to see the side effects, the unintended harms of that in being reflected in these excess death numbers. Okay. Now, I need to put in this disclaimer. I'm not trying to be political here. Okay. You guys and gals know I'm a libertarian. I want to let you decide what is best for you and your life, okay? I have friends that are Democrats, friends that are Republicans. I have friends that are liberal, friends that are conservative. I like to hear from all different walks of life. But when you turn on the television, the media, as biased as it is, frequently pins California and Florida together. And so as such, here I'm doing those same comparisons, but giving you the nuances that are often omitted from those crude comparisons. Okay. So with that out of the way, here we go. Let's look at the overall numbers of excess deaths in the United States. It looks like I need to add this number or this image for you here in the US. So what you're actually seeing here, in 2021, there is a significant amount of excess death in the US and also in these different states. Hold on, let me add this image right here so you can see this one. This one actually tells the number quite well. Again, I'm not insinuating any conspiracy theories. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, why don't we care about the media seems to focus on the 800,000 cumulative deaths from COVID-19. but we often sort of don't hear about, well, what about the 1.196 million people that have died from cancer and the 1.38 million people that have died from heart disease during the same period? Again, friends, this is a cumulative number of deaths of 2.5 million people have died from both heart disease and cancer. Yet you see the drive-through lines are as busy as ever. People have been encouraged to order fast food from Uber Eats and Lyft and whatever else. People are taking advantage of the free donut offers, and 2.5 million people died from just combined of heart disease and cancer in comparison to only, and I say only 800,000 from COVID-19. Now, again, loss of life is loss of life. I'm not trying to undermine or diminish and say those people deserved it. I'm not saying any of that. But we need to understand that the risk factors for dying from COVID-19 are modifiable through nutrition, exercise, lifestyle, mindset. We talked about how anxiety is a problem. So we're hearing so much about saving lives, but we often don't hear about improving people's lifestyle and nutrition habits so as to make them less vulnerable. That saves lives as well. So let's get into some of these numbers, because if we care about saving lives, then we should be very concerned about the 15-fold increase in excess deaths in 2021. So in the United States, there was a reported 3.4 million deaths of all ages during the year 2020. Expected deaths were just 3 million. So during the year 2020, there was an increase in excess deaths of 13%. So there was an excess of 400,000 deaths in 2020. Now you might say, well, it was a new virus. We didn't know much about it, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's hear about 2021. Well, it turns out that as expected, the U.S., during the year 2021, there was an expected deaths of just 2.73 million, right? So that was the expected number. But so far, year to date, we have reported 3.155 million. So there is an increase above baseline, above the expected deaths of 15.4% in the US. Okay, now my theory here, again, it could be individuals had COVID and that made their blood thicker, so they clotted out. They didn't go to the hospital. But my theory, friends, is more and more people have become socially isolated for the past 18 months or 20 months and beyond, that we are starting to see the consequences of that manifested as excess mortality from non-COVID-19 related issues. Now, please, again, I haven't even looked at the comments yet here. That's my theory. I could be wrong on this theory. There would be really no way to prove that, but we can triangulate by looking at the rates of diabetes that have increased. Just talking with doctors who work in the ER or work in the ICU or are internal medicine or family medicine doctors. People are more depressed than they've been. They weigh more. If you know a firefighter or a paramedic, I know many of them have family friends who are in that profession. They frequently tell me, when we go on calls now for people who have coded or have heart issues or things like that, my back hurts more because the people are significantly heavier now. And I'm like, really? So you notice, like, just in this period of time, pre-COVID, post-COVID, and they say, oh yeah, without question, people are like, these sick people are so obese now. Like, we need 3 or 4 people to pick. Normally it could have been just myself, picking up a person or one other guy. Now we need to call in the reinforcement to pick people to put them on a gurney to get them into the ambulance. Like, some people, have thrown their backs out, which, that happens, but the frequency of worker, occupational injury just as a result of lifting these individuals has increased. So I don't know if you're hearing those stories, but and this is anecdotal, but we do have data from JAMA, from New England Journal of Medicine, that the average American gained like 20 plus pounds or so during the COVID. And we've talked about this term many times. Recidivism, meaning that when you gain weight, it's not like you just flick your fingers and it comes right off. That weight stays on, my friends. Weight is so much easier to gain than it is to lose. And so when you think like, if we just made 100 plus million Americans 20, 30 pounds overweight, that's no big deal. That is a big deal because of the unintended harms associated with that, okay? So that's what's going on here. Now, before we get into, let's continue on here and talk about Florida, evil Florida that let people, go to parks. People have been working out in gyms in Florida since May of 2020. Okay. Businesses have been open. Schools have been open. Kids haven't been wearing masks. You get it, right? Florida's wide open. So you would expect the 2021 and 2020 to just have this massive excess death in Florida, right? The rates would be just off the charts. Well, it turns out that Florida reported 246,000 deaths for all ages during the year 2020. The expected deaths were 222,000. So this was an increase in 24,000 deaths, and that is a 10% increase above the expected, right? Pretty much every state in both 2020 and 2021 has seen an increase in expected deaths. There's been an excess, right? But Florida's numbers are not that far off from all the other states that had severe restrictions. So to date, for 2021, Florida reported 246,000 deaths of all ages. The expected deaths thus far were just 203,000. So there's been an increase in 42,000 deaths. That is a 20% increase. So that sounds like a lot, like 20%. Well, remember, the U.S. was at 15.4%. So it's a little above the U.S., but considering the fact that most states had much more strict measurements and the fact that Florida has an elderly population, the second highest concentration of people over the age of 65 out of any other state. It's a number 2 state for elderly people, right? People like to go to Florida because it's sunny, it's warm and everything, especially as they get older and they retire, play golf, go to the beach and so on. I get it. Now let's look at California. So during the year 2020, California had an increase in 39,000 deaths. Okay, so there was a 13.6% excess death rate in the state of California. Now, here's where things get quite interesting for the year of 2021. Thus far, there's been 259,000 deaths, and which is an increase of 46,000 deaths, excess deaths for California. And that's a 17.8% increase in excess deaths, right? So remember, Florida, wide open, let people do whatever they want, no mandates. Gyms have been open, wide open, no mask mandates. Kids have been in school. California had a 17.8% increase in excess deaths. Florida had a 20.8% increase. So yes, on a percentage basis, more people did die in the state of Florida. Got to keep in mind, friends, again, we're just comparing these two states here. We have to keep in mind that Florida has a much older population. California is much younger. California has been essentially overly restricted and closed during the same time period, whereas Florida has been essentially wide open. So why do I say all this stuff? Okay, again, I'm not trying to be political. I want you to just think, if the government could protect you, the individual, why isn't there a stronger correlation with these numbers, with comparing states with widely different populations in terms of, Florida being much older, California being much younger? Shouldn't there be a massive difference in these excess deaths and COVID numbers and everything? Like we just looked at this. This was directly from the CDC age-adjusted death rates from COVID-19. Florida coming in 27 out of 52 states. California coming in at 33, right? They're not too far off. So I'm just, I need a little bit more convincing that your governor or your mayor and all the rules that they've laid out for you to protect you, the individual, on the big scale, really move the needle in one way or the other. I'm not really seeing that. I think, we're reinforcing this idea that if you want to protect yourself, it starts with your nutrition. It starts with your exercise, your sleep habits, your relationship, your work, your meaning, your purpose. In California, there were so many people who were unemployed or their businesses were closed or overly restricted. They lost customers, financial stress. Paying people to stay home and go on Twitter all day, that's no way to have meaning and purpose in your life. Humans need meaning and purpose, and that's how people flourish. You can read a book behind me by Marty Seligman who talks about that. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have meaning and purpose, you're going to be depressed and get weird feelings and things. Okay, so let's talk about why people are dying. And again, this is just a hypothesis, But staying home, closing gyms, closing parks, discouraging people from connecting with those that they care about, I really, truly believe, look in the numbers, we are seeing a reflection of that. Look at cancer is up, Alzheimer's and dementia. Look at these numbers in terms of percentage increase during certain times of the year. So this is if you look at the scale here on the x-axis, what you're seeing here is weeks of 2020. And if you look here, and during most weeks, there's a huge increase in deaths, and the cause of death being from hypertension, also heart failure, brain disorders, and diabetes. Look at diabetes, okay? So there's been a significant 15 to 17% increase in deaths from diabetes. Well, I don't need to tell you. How do you get diabetes? Well, you overeat, you sit at home, and you don't exercise, right? How do you get high blood pressure? You get stressed out, you don't sleep as well, you're isolated, so you're anxious and depressed. You overconsume food, you stockpiled bread and pasta during the pandemic, and you get high blood pressure. And maybe you, unfortunately, have a heart attack or some other issue. So, the point of doing this podcast and this live session with you is I want to get your feedback, but when are we going to talk about all of these people that are dying from heart disease and cancer and depression and suicide? Society is so focused on the 800,000 and there's this political posturing. And look, I think those people deserve acknowledgement. Lives have been torn apart by COVID. I'm not, undermining that at all. But I find it odd that there's really no mention about, well, how can we also prevent, if all lives matter, right? And if we're serious about every life is a tragedy lost. Well, shouldn't we be focused on the 2.5 million from heart disease and cancer that have died during the same time period? Why are we only focusing on the 800,000 from COVID? I don't get that. Here's another visual. And friends, you can find these right from the CDC. Just go to type in Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever. CDC excess death numbers by cause 2020 or 2021. And you can find these reports and you can look at them. I think you should be looking at them. I think we all need to know, how are people most likely to die? And what are their ages? What is this, when you hear about this emergency with regards to the virus, well, what's an emergency? 2.5 million people that have died or 800,000? I mean, neither is good, but shouldn't we be focusing equally on both? And that's just my premise here. I'm not trying to be insensitive. So let's get to some of your live questions. Again, friends, I'm always grateful that you're here live with us. It means a lot to me. And thank you for listening on iTunes. And let's get to these questions. Okay, Alien Drone Services says gyms murder people. People don't get healthy by visiting gyms. I'll just say straight up, that's wrong. People do get healthy by visiting gyms. Gyms is a source of social connection. There's a lot of really good benefits from going to the gym. That doesn't mean you have to go to the gym to be healthy, but we shouldn't have politicians restricting people from accessing gyms. Okay, Steve King is here. Okay. Rob Bacon, whose granny are we killing tonight? You're funny. Okay. Okay, David says, being at the top level of the range for testosterone levels for men dramatically improves T cell count. Burns fat, reduces insulin resistance. Can you do a video on this? Sure, David. Yeah, we can do a video on testosterone. I'm a huge fan of having, higher testosterone. So that's a great question and comment. So thank you for that. Susie, what's going on? Thank you for being here, Susie. Swamp Hawk in the house. Thank you, sir. David says, smash that like button. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you, guys. There's just a lot of good comments here. I appreciate that. I did not get a free donut is one comment. Yes, neither did I. Yeah, as you can imagine. Swamp Hawk says, yes, more COVID under the new guy's watch. Yeah, you don't hear about that much, though, do you? Last year, there was roughly 375,000 people who died during 2020. But during 2021, there was 425,000 people who have died. But, that doesn't make the news much. It did last year. So that just shows you the bias of the media, which is sad. COVID tunnel vision, yeah. Yep. Seed oils, yes, seed oils are a problem. Okay, Saw Miller Smith says, I'm 73 and not vaccinated nor wear a mask, social distancing, or stay home. You're still alive? Oh my gosh, I don't know how you're still alive, Saw Miller 73, but that's incredible. Thank you for your comment. Oh, interesting. So deaths of despair. Yeah, that makes sense. Susie says, I remember bedside nursing as a patient who was so obese they had to use 2 beds to makeshift a bed big enough to care for someone who could not easily move in their space. That's just sad. And the people who gained the most weight were the people who were already obese or overweight, right? Which is not good. Yes, I'm aware of Cornell University news. Interesting, for sure. Okay. What else? Yeah, someone is saying the elderly in Florida are generally healthy. I agree. I agree with that. All right. What other questions do we have? I see a lot of great comments. Thank you for your comments. Can I try to reach to Joe Rogan for an interview? That would be cool. Maybe you guys can help too. I would love that, but who knows if it would happen. Okay. Someone is saying don't take your vitamin D at night. We did a whole video on vitamin D. Dosing it at night seems to be helpful for some people, not everyone, but it can be helpful for some. So give that a whirl. When is the BS going to end? Shoot, I don't know, man. I wish I knew. Goldie Cowfield says it's because COVID is now easier to control people. Yeah, I think you're right. Heart disease and cancer take a long time to appear. That could be part of it. I'm with you there. Okay. Susie says, men can aromatize their own testosterone into estrogen under certain conditions, usually more common in obese and men, but not always. That's a subject. Yeah, we should talk about aromatase. That's a good idea. Good idea there. Well, friends, if you don't have any questions, I think we might end it here, and then people can come back and watch this if they so choose. My mom's 73 health markers got COVID back to normal in 7 days. Wow. Back to lifting in 10 days. 73-year-old woman. That's amazing. That's awesome. Good job, Mom. Keep it up. Well, friends, have an awesome evening. Thank you for being here so late. I wanted to just make this one live so that it's just here. It's there. It's done. The ums and the ahs and the screw ups, whatever. That's just how it is. But thank you for tuning in. I'll go back and edit, make the show notes and the timestamp so you can access information quickly. But have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on a future episode down the road. If you want this shirt, I will put that in the link below so you can check it out. All right, all. Bye now. Thanks for that like button too. See ya.